Welcome back. Just follow and DM me on Twitter if you want to be in the next episode. Okay, so just a quick note. When you send me artwork, please don't scale it up. Check this out. The pixel density here isn't the same. So it's harder for me to now draw on this artwork to improve it.
Here we go.
So the main thing I think that you could improve on this artwork is the contrast. This is a very common mistake, and it's because when you draw like this close up, you see the contrast between colors. But remember, when you zoom out, it's harder to see that contrast. You can barely see the contrast here in the preview. So the main thing I would do is I would select this green. And if you're using Aseprite, link in the description, by the way. I'm not sponsored by them, but I get a tiny little kickback. So if you use Aseprite, this is really easy, but you can figure this out in Photoshop and stuff like that. You go to your like magic wand tool, and you can, in most programs, you can pick a certain color. And you see how it selected it everywhere? And now you can color over it. But there's something really cool. Control D deselects, by the way. And now if I paint bucket this color, normally it just paint buckets everything that's touching. However, if we turn contiguous off here, it'll change it everywhere in the artwork. And I keep that in mind, and that's why I like to reuse a lot of colors and use a small color palette, because it's really easy to then go and alter the colors. That's a pro tip right there. Anyway, I think that the contrast needs to be higher, and I would make this part of the grass lighter. And I'm gonna try two versions. I'm gonna try one that's more saturated and less saturated, and I'm looking at the preview now. So let's try much more saturated, all the way in the top right corner there. And that looks pretty cool. And I love saturated colors and saturated color palettes. However, it might also be better to go lighter and move some of that saturation. And that looks a little bit more natural, I think. And then if you remember hue shifting, it's where when you go lighter or darker, you shift hues. Usually when I go darker, I go towards blues. So we would move towards the right side. And when I go lighter, I move towards the reds, the yellows. So I'm gonna go a lot more towards the yellow here. And now you see how it's brighter, but it also creates more contrast because the hue is different. And sometimes you don't even need to make a color brighter. You just need to change the hue and it will look brighter. So let's try making this a different hue now, but more saturated. Yep, there we go. I like that. And just for fun, I'm gonna go completely yellow. And look, even though that is completely yellow, it's still, look, that's a little too yellow, but that's still pretty good. It still works. And the opposite of that would be going towards blues. And I think that blue in grass is kind of cool, but I like to use the blues more for when I'm shading, not when I'm highlighting. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make it, a little bit lighter like that. And check that out. Wow, that looks pretty cool. I think the contrast with this cliff edge is really high too. So up here, it does make sense for it to be dark, but near the water, I don't think it does. So I'm gonna pick a color that's just a little bit darker, and there we go. For this part, actually, let me turn contiguous on, and that way I can kind of show you how I think it should look. So I think that this part right here needs to be a little bit darker, and the part under the grass needs to be a lot darker. See, something like that I think is pretty cool. Here how you have the water near the edge, something I like to do is I like to actually, if I go ahead and make this, I think size 4, and switch it to a square, no, size 2, and switch it to a square. Now it's the size of your pixels. So something that I like to do is if you do a white edge, oops, I messed that up already. So oh my gosh. So if you do a white edge right where the water touches, it looks like foam and bubbles and whatever, and it adds a little bit more to that. You see that? And you don't even need to have a solid line there. It could just go like this, be a little bit messy, but it makes it look a little bit more like that water is crashing up against the stone. It's a pretty cool little thing you can do, and you can even do it in when you have like a little waves. Add a little bit of white there to make it look like it's reflective. All right, let's move on to the next artwork. I like it. This one's pretty cool. I'm not exactly sure what's going on up here. Kind of looks like there's it doesn't look like it's So the first tip I got for you isn't even a pixel art tip. It's name your layers, bruh. I do see that you're, trying to use minimal colors. However, if you use minimal colors, you can't use them so frequently, right? Because even though this does have shading, the head would actually be even lighter. So for example, I actually think that, you should have even lighter colors up here on the head and use more of the lighter color on the head up here. The face also doesn't really make too much sense for me. I'm not sure why there's a little corner here, so I'm just gonna plop that pixel there and there. I don't know if I'm messing up your design or whatever, but that to me looks more correct. But you see how I made the whole top of the head lighter? Because there's a ton of light up there, and you probably want to do the same thing for the shoulders here. I do like that, you're highlighting, but this whole thing would actually be lighter, the entire top, because your lighting's not coming, just from here. You're always going to have lighting coming from the side and the top. So you kind of have to make sure that all the things that are pointing straight up, they should probably have a lot more highlights on them. And then for the cape, well, since you have that light coming from above, I'd make the whole cape darker. Edit, adjustments, brightness and contrast. All right, let's tone down the brightness there. And check that. Oh man, that just instantly looks so much better. It also, I don't think you need all that contrast in the cape, honestly. I don't think you need that many colors in the cape. I would almost make the cape one color, but I would go with a darker cape, just because even if you wanted the cape to be gray, don't take this, don't be offended by this, but I think it's poor design if the cape is exactly the same color as the armor. It probably wouldn't be. Now maybe you're trying to do a limited color palette, but if you are trying to do a limited color palette, then have the body and the cape not use all the same colors or not the same amount. So we could still make this cape darker, but then, choose one of these darker colors. If you're trying to use a limited color palette, don't choose the same color as the main armor. Because if you're using a limited color palette, then the colors don't just represent shading, they literally represent objects. So you would want intentionally the cape to be a color that is not exactly the same as the armor. Wow, I think I feel like I ranted way too much to get that point across. I'm gonna put a couple of highlights here on the shoulders. It looks like the head actually is, some of the stuff is on the shoulder, so I'm just gonna merge that down so that way it's not overlapping oddly. And then this blade right here, it does look like the same color as the eyes, and there are some lines in here, but I don't exactly know what you're going for with this blade, whether these lines are supposed to make it look kind of like it's got energy in it or something like that. So I'm not gonna mess with that too much. I think the boots are pretty awesome. This shading for the crease, it's awesome, but I would add a little bit more shading to the boots. Not really a big deal. And this right here to me looks a little bit odd. I'm not sure why there's so much shading on one side but not the other. If you're going to use this as a really dark outline, for example here by the foot, I would actually continue this up the boot. And for this one, I would probably transition into it a little bit like this. And I know you're trying to avoid using outlines, but it's kind of odd to have this much dark shading near the bottom and not make it an outline. So I'm trying to sort of do what you're doing, kind of like that. Maybe, there we go, something like that. I would probably remove the highlight from the corner, because if the foot is facing me, then the highlight actually wouldn't be on the corner, it would be on the top. You see what I did there? And I don't know, I might be messing with it too much, but the shape of it I think would probably be a little bit I think I might be messing it up. You know what? Completely disregard that tip. The rest of this body is pretty cool. I would add a little bit more shading maybe up here by the helmet, and the back of this helmet I think looks too light. So a lot of the body parts here have this dark outline shading, but it looks like it's missing from the head. So I would go ahead and add a little bit of that onto the head here. I think it's just gonna make it look a little bit better if the outline isn't so light. It looks like you did go for an outline here, but it's way too light. We can transition to it being that light but I think you do need the darker sections of it. The shape of it is actually a little bit hard for me to make out. I'm gonna alter the shape a little because I think it's supposed to be a little bit more like that. If I don't know, it's a little hard for me to see, but overall it looks pretty cool. This section right here, I'm not sure why it's so dark. Honestly, you could probably do something like that if you were trying to sort of transition this. I just think this color is too dark. If we're using colors that you already have, existing colors, I would actually use this gray, not that black. I don't think you needed to go so dark with it. You know, something like that might be fine. And right here, the contrast between these two is too high, so it would actually make more sense for that to be gray and for us to just have that tiny corner there be the outline, because I know you're trying to make it look like the chin's sticking out, but there's already a large enough contrast between these two that we don't need to go and add another outline or make this even darker. It already looks like that part sticks out. And for this shoulder, I would probably make it a little bit larger, just because it's closer than this other shoulder, and by making it larger, you won't have that weird section between the shoulder plate and the helmet where it looked like you had some kind of odd shading. What I'm basically talking about is right here, that crease. You see that? Oh my gosh, I accidentally turned on my GeForce settings. I gotta change the shortcut for that. But this crease right here, you could do it. You could use shading. That might be too harsh. I'm trying to kind of use the same colors that you have. But basically, yeah, you could shade a little bit more here to kind of give it some kind of more, to give it a little bit more form. But I think that's an unnecessary detail actually, so I'm just gonna keep it a little bit simpler and leave it at something like that. We could make it super dark. Let's see what that looks like. But then no, because of the minimal colors, you guys, because of the minimal colors, it just won't look right. If I added more colors, I could probably make it look right, but I'm trying to reuse the same colors that you have. All right, let's move on to the next artwork before I start over critiquing every little thing in this. So this last one's a sneaker, and I love the shape of this. This was really well done. It looks like a real sneaker. However, it looks like you got a shoelace problem. So the shoelace and the sneaker are very similar in color, and I'm not going to try to change the color of the shoelaces too much because I get what you're going with here. You know, you want to have black. So let's find a way. All right, let me show you a way that we could try to get those shoelaces to be a little bit more noticeable. I think the easiest thing you could do, I'm gonna do this on a new layer. I think the easiest thing that you could do is just create highlights. Now, what I mean by that is a good way to, this isn't realistic, but a good way to sometimes point out or highlight two sections when they're the same color is to use the color white or gray, for example. And this way, what I'm doing is I'm just adding a little bit of a outline, but it's a light outline. It's the opposite of what you would think. Like when you think of outlines, you always think of them as being like a black outline, right? But you can make white outlines. Here, for this, I'll actually use white to kind of just emphasize what I'm talking about. And I'll do it on both sides. So you can outline things in white just to show that there are two objects there. And I mean, for this sneaker, I think it looks kind of bad to use a white outline, which is why I'm using the gray one. But for some cases, for this, I think all you need to do is just put a little bit of gray here and there to highlight parts of the shoelace. Maybe a little bit over here, maybe here. It doesn't even need to be everywhere, just a couple sections. For this part right here, I don't think that you need a black outline, and I think it might look better, honestly, without it. What I would do is use a really dark red. Okay, so I changed that black outline to a dark red, and personally, I think that looks a little bit better because it looks more like it's the outline. And then for this part right here, I would probably go really, really dark gray. I also wouldn't use black. It looks like there's black is used in too many locations. So by not using black in spots like this, It helps kind of separate the sections. All right, and then because there's so much detail in this, I think that what you could do is you could do a little bit of anti-aliasing, like smooth this out a little bit. Let me show you what I mean. I'm gonna pick a gray, a pretty light gray. I don't want to go too dark. And right here in the corners, I'm just gonna add that gray. And what that'll do is it'll smooth that out. It'll look a little bit smoother, and it looks like it has more detail. I hope you can see that. All right, I think you get the point. I don't really get why there's these dots here. I don't know what the sneaker that you're replicating looks like, but this looks odd to me. There's like, is this blue? There's like blue lines in this. I don't really get it, and it looks messy. Even if the sneaker actually has something like that, I would probably just remove it for the sake of this pixel art, because it looks kind of weird. I don't get what those blue dots there were. And even within here, you could add a little bit of shading within these curves. You see how that part is lighter and then this part can get darker? It makes it look like there's more curvature to the sneaker. Watch this. You see that? It makes it look more like it bends there. And then in the front here, you could add more of a highlight. I don't know, something like that. But basically now it looks like there's a little bit of reflection there. I would increase maybe this a little bit more too. These colors are very, very similar. So I would maybe lighten this up a tiny bit, just so that it's more visible. Probably do the same for that section up there. I forgot to click this little, if you click this little box, your artwork moves around oddly, kind of. And then if you click it again, it keeps your artwork, your preview still. And I'm sorry I didn't notice that sooner, but whatever. Anyway, I'm one of the developers working on Dwerve. It's a tower defense dungeon crawler RPG. It's a genre mashup, and it's going to be pretty cool. Please wishlist it on Steam. I made some free pixel art assets that you can use in your games or whatever. There's a link in the description. If you want to support the channel, get help with your pixel art, check out my Patreon. I'll see you guys next time. Devla.